Hello, friends. Today we have with us Mr. R. Subramaniam. He is one of the most respected officers from Indian Administrative Services and currently serving as Secretary in Ministry of Social Justice and Empowerment. Sir, thanks for sparing time. Welcome to the discussion, sir. So, sir, as you know, this COVID crisis has certainly hit the most backward section of the society, most marginalized section of the society, and poor, sir. So, sir, as government and as Ministry of Social Justice, sir, what do you think these people need to do to actually emerge out of this crisis? And what kind of initiatives your ministry is taking to ensure that these marginalized sections of the society, people from the marginalized sections of society, actually come out of this crisis, sir?
Thanks for raising this very important point. It is affecting everybody today. This is a matter that is on everybody's mind. Actually, the crisis has affected every country, everybody in this world. But the impact of the crisis on each person is very different. I think there are some people who are able to cope up with it. The people who have got the power to stay on, and then there are people who are living on a day-to-day basis who are impacted a lot much more. So I think today when we are talking about rebuilding the economy post the COVID crisis, the fundamental focus of the economy should be on supporting those people to get back to livelihoods who have lost it thanks to shutting down of the economy, and they are completely in a state of deprivation, and many people in the state of starvation. So I think let us start with understanding who these people are and what are the how they are characterized, what are the previous experiences where working with them has succeeded. So I will start with this. Whom are we talking about when we are saying that the marginalized, the poorest, who are actually hardest hit in the COVID crisis? We are talking about a crore households in the country, a crore households in the country. Almost 60-40 in the rural and urban areas, and these uh, these households cut across the entire social spectrum. Although I think when we do the correlation, it possibly correlates a lot with marginalized sections like SCs, other impoverished sections. But we are talking about this 1 crore households whose livelihoods are lost, whose livelihoods have to be built back. Now, what is that we are talking about? I mean, when we say 1 crore people's households are hit very badly, their livelihoods are lost. Let us understand what are the characteristics by which we can identify them. Uh, First is that mostly these are assetless households, mostly assetless. Urban area, of course, completely assetless. In rural area, you have landless agriculture workers who are dependent completely on daily wages, and informal sector. Primarily, these are all in the informal sector, so they don't have any formal benefits, support mechanisms that are existing in a formal system. They don't have access to health. Suppose if they fall ill, what happens is that they just get into debt and then possibly get into a bonded state. So this is any health catastrophe is actually taking them back by several decades. And most importantly, they don't have access to credit. So we are now talking about what can be done to these 1 crore households so that they not only get their livelihoods, but then they come to a stage where they don't have to fight for existence. I just wanted to briefly take you through some of the examples, some of the good success stories, which I have personally been associated with, and which has brought in a lot of satisfaction. When we were working in the tribal areas of Andhra Pradesh and subsequently with the rural poor, we found that the dependence on government and dependence on subsidy was actually not taking them out of poverty. Then when we experimented with the concept of a collective self-help, when everybody came together, they realized their own strength and their own weakness, and then started saving 1 rupee a day, and they suddenly found that the access to a collective fund has actually suddenly took them out of the hands of the money lenders, and then given them an opportunity to start saving, going to the banks. So the SHG movement has actually is one very sterling example where the poor have come together and can come together in more numbers, where they can realize their own collective strength by working together, saving together, taking up enterprises together, and then thereby finding that the access to credit which was not there has been brought back. So I think this is one very good example. Based on that, what has happened in Andhra, the NRLM, National Rural Livelihood Mission, has been built up, and then now there are crores of people who are in the self-help group. But I think the time has come when we have to rediscover this collective self-help and then take it forward with a lot of vigor. I think that's definitely is going to really help. Second strategy that will help is that we need to skill them, because one of the fundamental things that we see in this poorest 1 crore households is that they are either unskilled or semi-skilled, and because of the want of an adequate skill, they are always at the losing end of the bargain with the employer. So skilling them up is one fundamental thing. Prime Minister Modi has actually focused a lot of his attention on how to bring skills to the people, and there's a separate ministry now. There's a lot that's happening, but what we do from the social justice is to how to ensure that this poorest people get access to the skill, and the skill should be such that it should not be a short-term, very short-term sort of a skill. It has to be a skill which can give them a sustainable livelihood. So it has to be long-term. It has to be market relevant, and it has to be through institutions which are having some repute. So this is the second thing that can certainly happen. Third thing that must happen post-COVID is to bring this 1 crore into the health insurance network. As you know, PM-JAY, as we call Ayushman Bharat, is the biggest health insurance program possibly in the whole world. We already have about 8 crore people in this. We must get this 1 crore into this. I think unless we get this 1 crore into that, then we
when you are saying 1 crore means 1 crore households.
Households. 1 crore households, if they are brought into Ayushman Bharat, then I think then we are assuring them access to credit because of the collective work, access to enterprises, access to more skilled work, and then access to the health systems. There's one more thing, is that their access to educational system also has to be seen. So these are all strategies, I think, which we need to really build up. Government has already announced huge packages. These packages are supposed to take this economy, put the economy back on rail. But I think these strategies I'm stating would need to be pursued further. These are, as you have rightly pointed out, these are medium-term and long-term solutions. And unless we do that, I think we will have a tough time in the future.
Sir, I work for Ministry of Human Resource Development as Chief Innovation Officer. And my primary agenda is, or goal is, to promote innovation and entrepreneurship within our educational institutes. So, sir, we have large number of students who are doing technology. So, sir, what we should do as our youngsters, or how educational institutes or how students can support some of these initiatives which you are talking about? What role they can play in bringing about the change which you are talking about?
It's very important that the youth come forward in setting this economy right. I'll tell you why. Across the globe, I mean, there are no exceptions to this. Across the globe, wherever there has been a quantum jump in either societal or economic growth, that has always been initiated from the youth. It has been a youth-led initiative across the world. You see any transformative society across the world, the transformation has always begun from the students and from the youth. So I think it is possible that the youth can identify households within your own reach. Let's not talk about Bharat. I mean, big country like Bharat. Let us talk about the households who are around you. Can we identify that? Is it possible for us to bring this concept of a collective self-help into them? Can we ensure that their children get to school? Can we ensure that they get enrolled in the Ayushman Bharat? These are simple things which each one of you can do it. It doesn't require an IAS officer to do this. This is something which every student in his own purview around himself can do it. So I think my appeal through you to your listeners would be to take this as an opportunity to look around you, and then look at the misery around you and then address that. There are two types of people. There are people, in fact, there are three types of people. I would say that people who look at the misery and turn the other way around and then go away. There are set of people who look at the misery and feel bad about it and do nothing about it. And then the third set of people are those people who look at the misery, feel bad about it, and do something. It is a third category of the people who are needed now, and this is a category which each one of your listeners can become. So I also wanted to state that why is it that a student who is studying engineering, say in IIT or in a good engineering college, be bothered about this? I mean, he should be bothered about his career, his employment, his placement, etc. No, because unless you look at the poorest, you are at your weakest. Unless you look at the poorest, you are at your weakest. I'll tell you why. Any link is as good as its weakest. Any chain is as good as its weakest link. So unless you strengthen your weakest link, your chain is not going to be strong. So also, let me, in economic terms, what it means is that when poor gets access to money, poor get access to purchasing power, it is actually going to translate into a higher economic growth. Money multiplier is a concept which many of you would know. The money multiplier, when the money goes into the hand of a poorer section, is much higher than the money multiplier when it goes into the hands of the slightly better off person. So therefore, in many ways, not only as a person with some empathy, but even
when you think there are even business opportunities in these kind of initiatives.
There will be business opportunities. Unless you address the requirements of the poorest, you will not grow. The society will not grow, and you will not grow personally also. So therefore, my appeal to all your listeners would be to focus some time on working for the poorest of the people around you.
So, sir, you spoke about social innovation. You didn't use the word social innovation, but when you said about working for the poor and creating a business model out of it, it is more of a social enterprise which can come through social innovations, sir. So, sir, India is aiming at $5 trillion economy. Currently, maybe due to this COVID crisis, there will be a short-term contraction in this economy. But our long-term goal is actually looking at $5 trillion economy, sir. So, as Ministry of Social Justice, sir, whether you are doing something different to ensure that entrepreneurship actually also emerges out from this weaker section of society?
Absolutely. So, the drive towards promoting entrepreneurship has started with again Prime Minister's startup movement, and you have yourself led this major Smart India hackathon, which has actually brought out a lot of talent in the people, in the students. And as you have seen, year after year after year, we see large number of people joining this bandwagon, and in many campuses now innovation, thinking differently, finding out of box solutions for the social problems, that has become a fad. That's very important. Unless it becomes a fad, the students will not like it. So the Smart India hackathon, therefore, I think has actually built up this culture of innovation across campuses, and I really hope that this will go forward. Now, when we are really looking at social innovation in the poorest sections, who are in the campuses, we we face a little bit of a challenge. The challenge is this, that the prime emphasis in the household of the student from, let us say, a poor SC household or ST household, or even economically backward household, would be to immediately get to a job, find a naukri dhundna hai. That's the main focus of the household. I am not that is completely understandable. So even the people who are having entrepreneurial ideas, path breaking ideas, they latch on to the first job that comes onto their way, and then they get into a rigmarole of going to office, doing this. So as a result, the entire innovation or a spirit of innovation with which they have demonstrated in the campuses, that gets lost, and that's a huge loss to the nation. So what we are trying to do is that, can we set up a hub, entrepreneurial hub for the poorest and the weakest? What does the hub mean? You have an idea, you want to take it to a commercial, and that idea has been evaluated, accepted that it is an innovative idea, and that idea has to be promoted, and over a period of 3 to 5 years, if it requires to become a commercial venture. So for the 3 to 5 years, can we support this youth with some sort of a economic package, which should not be less than what they would get if they go to a normal naukri? So this is the concept on which we are working, and I think we would like to institutionalize this at the earliest. So once that gets going, then I think there will be greater assurance for the people to take to innovation, and social innovation or economic innovation, as we can call it, and come out with path breaking ideas. So we are at it. Apart from this, we also have what is called as a venture capital scheme. So any student, any youth who comes up with a good idea, starts an enterprise, we can bring venture capital up to 5 crores. It's not a small amount, up to 5 crores, so that they can actually build up their enterprise into a sustainable enterprise with which can actually employ more people. So the focus, again, Prime Minister's focus has been naukri ke liye mat dhundo, naukri dene ke liye dhund. So this has been his clarion call, and I think we can do it. I think we must now look beyond COVID, look into the future of it with a greater positive outlook.
Sir, as Chief Innovation Officer, sir, I routinely talk about failures. And I tell students to actually don't get bogged down with the failures, but actually celebrate those failures, because we learn from failures a lot. We learn more than what we learn from successes, right, sir? So, sir, in your tenure of 25, 30 years, what were your failures, sir? And whether those failures actually helped you now function better or envisage solutions in a better way now working currently?
Absolutely. I think many such instances, but I'll just share with you a few interesting ones. Angry young man is an epithet which is commonly used to Amitabh Bachchan on the screen. But I mean, when we were young, we really sort of lived that role. So when it is a question of dealing with a politician, or whether it's a minister or an MLA, so we used to really go hammer and tongs. So in fact, the attitude has been, the stronger the person, you must behave the roughest. That is a sort of a personality trait which was there at the younger thing. I think that does lead to failures, because I think you know uh, uh, failure, from when you analyze a failure and identify where things have gone wrong, then you have a maximum chance to grow. So in business, especially social enterprise or other types of innovations, I think failure should be the biggest blessing. I mean, not that I wish failures to you, I wish all the successes for you, but whenever there is a failure, never get disheartened. But please understand that failure occurs because you don't look at the whole perspective. You are actually maybe proceeding in one particular direction without assessing the challenges on the other side. If you assess the challenge and then match your strengths with the challenge, and then depending on that, take take careful steps forward, careful but determined steps forward, you are bound to succeed. Sometimes what happens is that you are carried away. Sometimes that's normal, for a young person to get carried away with enthusiasm, not looking this way, that way, not getting the whole picture. Then you could make mistakes, but you will learn a lot. I have learned a lot from the failures in my career, and not that I'm still learning. Actually, that learning is a lifelong thing. Yeah.
So Subramaniam sir, you are a big proponent of innovation. You are considered to be one of the most innovative officers in IAS cadre, in a sense. So, sir, what is your message to our youngsters, and on how they should handle their career? Because large number of them might be even aspiring to be an IAS officer, sir. Whether they become IAS officers or whether they don't become IAS officers, what is your mantra of success for them?
Well, that's a really huge question. See, I have never deliberately tried to be innovative. See, how does innovation come? Innovation comes out of an adverse situation. So, for example, I mean, if we just go back, the man has discovered fire because he was feeling cold. He had no other way to sort of keep the cold, so he innovated fire. So, every innovation, if you look at, has arisen out of an adversity. So when you look at, so therefore adversity is a great opportunity. I want to emphasize this. If you face an adversity, it's a great opportunity. But that opportunity has to be encashed. It can be encashed only provided you are willing to look at an out of the box solution, currently unknown solution, to overcome that. So it's a mindset. So first thing is that you must face an adversity. If you are in a state of comfort, there will be no innovation. I can assure you that. There could be poetry if you are in sort of great comfort. But if you want innovation, you must face an adversity. And then second thing is that you should have the mindset to overcome the adversity. If you think that adversity is too much, so I just bow my head and then curse my fate, then there cannot be any innovation. So you must have that the challenging attitude to overcome adversities. Third thing is that you should have that attitude has to translate itself into out of the box solutions. So is the solution which I'm currently doing, is it good enough? If it is not good enough, what will work? So this out of the box solution is very important. Lastly, I would say that it requires analytical bent of mind. See, if you are a very obeying student, say very good student, you study a lot and then get great marks, you may not be innovating at all. I'm not asking you not to study. I'm only saying that you should have the capacity to question, analyze, and understand. Then only you will be able to innovate. So I think these are fundamental characteristics of what constitutes an innovation, or an innovative mind. I'm not claiming that I have this, but I have always looked at how we can do our work better. Whenever you get posted, see, I will just share with you one very interesting example. Normally IAS officers, they like to, I mean, they want cushy posting. They want to be in major metros, where they sort of always in the public eye. So we all got posted to tribal areas, which are completely unwanted by everybody. So in the government's wisdom, so what we thought is that if you are here, then there is an adversity. If you consider it an adversity, there is an opportunity to do a lot more. So in fact, I consider that posting in the most backward areas, deprived areas, is a fantastic opportunity to bring the best out of you. So so it happens. So in the tribal areas, many things have happened. I'll just tell you one basic fundamental experience that we have had in the tribal areas. So in the tribal areas, as soon as we were posted, the basic issue has been what is called as the shifting cultivation, Podu cultivation. This, I think, all of you would know, that the tribal cuts the forest. He will do farming for 1 or 2 years. Then he will leave it. He will cut somewhere else. So it is a huge environmental challenge, because he is actually in the as the population has grown, the forests were disappearing. So when we sat with the people and then found that why is it that he shifts? Basically because his agricultural practices are not modern, and then he doesn't have any title for the land. So first we provided a title for the land. So that was a very major task, where I think about 10,000 acres of land was assigned to the tribals, and thousands of the tribal households have first, for the first time, owned land. Otherwise they were living in the forest, but they owned land. And then second thing is to bring in an agricultural practice which will be in tune with the environment, but and at the same time produces sustainable income. So this horticulture program has started in a very major way. It was in fact initiated by my predecessor, but we carried forward, and we found that by bringing in a green cover, you are actually bringing not only protecting environment, but protecting a livelihood of a person. And then he stopped shifting cultivation, because they for the first time they found with it. So I'm basically saying that you can actually convert every adversity to an opportunity and then bring something new.
So, sir, let's conclude on this very positive note, sir. I hope students will learn from what you have said. Thanks for sparing time. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much.
Wonderful talking to you, and all the very best to you and to your team and all the students who would be watching this. All the very best.